We were talking about business process management systems. All right, let's look at the architecture of a business process management system. Okay, sorry about that, bit of a cold. All right, so let's talk about the architecture. So the architecture of a business process management system. You can see there from the diagram, it has a number of components. So at the heart, there's two main things at the heart of a business process management system. First off, we have a process model repository, and we have a process modeling tool. And this is what Signavio is. Signavio is a process modeling tool. Actually, it's a little bit more than that, but we're just using Signavio mostly as a process modeling tool. Then there's a process repository. So you can model the process and you store it over here in the repository. All right, then we have the execution engine. Now, a model can be directly passed from the modeling tool to the execution engine. And this is a little bit about what BMP did. BMP is not a proper execution engine. Oh, sorry, BIMP. That's what we used last week. BMP is a simulation engine. Okay, not a proper execution engine, but a simulation engine. And so these two things over here were sort of a bit of what we were doing last week with modeling a process and then executing it. Okay, so along with the execution engine, then we need an administration and monitoring tools. Then as a process is executed, we store execution logs, and there's also a worklist handler. So these are the major elements of a business process management system. And of course, the execution engine can also refer to external services. Okay, let's talk about them. So the execution engine itself. So the execution engine is central to the business process management system, always. Okay, so the different functionalities, so it provides a lot of different functionalities, and these include the ability to create executable process instance. So every time a piece of work arrives and a business process is to be formed, that becomes an executable process instance. Much like you can write a source code for a program. The moment somebody runs a program, it becomes an instance of a running program. And you can have many people run the same program. That creates many instances of a running program. So while we only have one program of source code, we only have one BPMN model. Every instance of the model is a case in execution. We have the ability to distribute work process to participants in order to execute a business process from the start to the end. And it gives us the ability to automatically retrieve and store data, which is required for the process. Okay, now together. So the execution engine is continually monitoring the progress of different cases and coordinating which activities to work on next by generating work items. So you might have multiple instances. You might have multiple instances of the business process being executed at any one time. And what the execution engine does is it monitors all those different process instances in the different cases. So a process instance is often referred to as a case, and it coordinates all those activities and what activities get worked on next, and it generates the work items for those activities. Okay, so instances of process activities that need to be taken care of for specific cases, and the work items are then allocated to resources, and those resources, they're qualified and authorized to work on specific activities. So when you define an activity, much like we did in BIMP, we define resources in the system. Remember, we defined credit officers, we defined clerks, and then we allocated, for each activity, we said which resource worked on which process. So when you authorize a resource to work on a specific activity, then one of the things that the execution engine will do will then schedule those resources, schedule workflow items to go to those resources. So the execution engine also interacts with other components as well. All right, the process modeling tool. So the process modeling tool, it offers different functionalities, such as the ability for the users to create and modify process models, which is what we did in Signavio. Signavio is a process modeling tool. So you can Signavio actually links in with quite a number of things. So we've linked Signavio in with BIMP to do a simulation. Signavio also works in with other tools as well. So the modeling tool should have the ability to annotate process models with additional data, which it did, and input and output participants. Signavio doesn't actually let us do the participants. We had to actually put that in BIMP. It also, the modeling tool, if it's associated with an execution engine, should also let you define business rules with associated activities. Okay, the modeling tool should give you the ability to store, share, and retrieve process models from the process repository, which Signavio does. And the process model can be deployed to the engine in order to be executed, either directly from the modeling tool, or the execution engine can then execute directly from the repository. So the engine will use the process models to determine the temporal and logic order in which those activities are done, and that's determined by the underlying business process model, which we develop using the modeling tool. Okay, and finally it determines which work items. So the process modeling tool determines which work items should be generated and to whom they should be allocated to, or which external services should be called. Now again, Signavio doesn't do that because it's not meant to be a modeling tool as part of an execution engine or part of that sort of system, but it does do some of that to some extent with other things, but we're not getting into that this semester. Okay, so here's the example of a BPMS, Bonita. I don't know if anyone has looked at Bonita. Let me just, I can't click the link, I've got my red pen on. I can cancel my red pen. Okay, so there's a website for BonitaSoft. BonitaSoft is a great piece of software. Now, I did download, there was a freeware version, which you can use. It didn't do everything. If anyone's interested in playing around with this, so BonitaSoft offers some great stuff you can play around with as a, I think there was a community edition. Yeah, a community edition up here, I think. I know it might be a different link, but there was a community edition of BonitaSoft. So if anyone is interested in that, then that's a good tool you can have a play around with. We're using Signavio. The reason we chose Signavio, of course, is you didn't have to download BonitaSoft. You had to download it onto each computer. Whereas if we use Signavio, then we can use it from the web, so you can use it anywhere. So you don't need to download specific software. But certainly, BonitaSoft is certainly a good tool to have a play with, if anyone is interested. Okay, let's look at the Worklist Handler. If you remember the architecture, the Worklist Handler. The Worklist Handler is a part of the BPMS, and it processes, which processes participants. Okay, so when you have a number of resources or participants, in BIMP last week it called them resources. We had credit officers, we had clerks. It'll process the participants in so much as it'll offer work items to participants, and it commits to these as well. The participants commit to the work items. So the execution engine keeps track of which work items are due and makes them available for the worklist handlers. So the execution engine, when a piece of work is due, it passes it off to the worklist handler, which will then decide who a piece of work goes to. So worklist handlers, they keep track of the individual participants. Okay, so the standard worklist handler of a business process management system, think of it as an inbox, like an email system. And if anyone has used the SAP system, that's almost exactly what it's like. So when you're using the workflow management system as part of SAP, when a bit of work is done and you're on the list to do a piece of work, what you do is basically you have something that looks like an inbox from an email system, and every time a work item arrives, it arrives into that workbox, and then as a participant, you just pick items out of that workbox, deal with them, finish with them, and the moment you click finished or processed, then it will take it out of your inbox, and then the execution engine, in conjunction with the Worklist Handler, will then pass it on to the next person who has to do something to it. So think of it as an inbox. So through that inbox, you can see which work items are ready to be executed. And a Worklist Handler might use electronic forms for input or output. And when you select a piece of work to be done, and the participant starts it, the corresponding electronic form is rendered on the screen. Now, the great thing about these Worklist handlers, they also keep track of when something arrives in your inbox, when something arrives in your work list of activities to perform, and when it actually leaves. So you can actually keep track of who is working and to what degree they're working, and how long it actually takes to process an item. I've got some examples of some screenshots in a minute. So this is what it might look like. So this is an example of a Worklist handler in, there's another business process management system called Camunda. Now, again, I'm not sure if there was a free version of Camunda, but it's certainly a well-known one. So this would be an example of your work list. So you can see over here, what you have is something that looks a bit like an inbox on your email system. And each one of these is a piece of work. So for instance, here's the first piece of work is provide payment data. So you click it, and then you will get an electronic form come up over here in this part of the screen. And you're handling payment data. So then you fill it out. You put in business keys. You fill out the credit card details and the names. You put it whatever values need to be put in, and then you click complete. Once you click complete, then your activity, your work in this activity is done, and then that would be taken out of your inbox. And if somebody else then had to do something with it, then that would be the execution handler, along with the Worklist service, would then pass it on to the next person in the list. So this is an automated workflow system. Okay, now administration and monitoring tools, also part of the architecture of a BPMS. Okay, so the administration monitoring tools, what they're necessary for, of course, is for the administration of all the operational matters that the BPMS has to undertake. So, for instance, if you've got a pool of resources, and we keep saying resources, but let's call them roles. I know SAP call them roles. Let's say we have a role of a credit clerk, and let's say you have 5 credit clerks in your pool. Then what if one of your credit clerks is sick that day? Okay, so then what you can do is you can flag that automatically in the system. The person is away for a day, or if they're on holidays, they've taken 2 weeks leave. And if the BPMS is aware of that, this is what the administration and monitoring tool component does, then they won't be allocated work for that time when they're away, either for sick leave or for annual leave or for whatever reason. Okay, it's also, the administration tool also helps to deal with exceptional situations. You know, you might have an outdated work item, so maybe a work item enters the system. Maybe it's been in the system for 2 weeks. So that would be classed as an exceptional situation where, and it might remove that outdated work item from the system. It might also be equipped with process monitoring functionality. You can monitor performance of running business processes, in particular with respect to an individual case. So if a customer rings up and said, look, I've instigated something 2 weeks ago, where is it? Then with these administration and monitoring tools, you can track down exactly where this bit of work has been over the past few weeks and who has worked on it and where it might be now. Okay, so, and you can aggregate a lot of that information from different cases, and you can look at average cycle times average cycle times, and for a fraction of the cases it might be delivered too late. So example, here's an architecture. So if we're talking about administration and monitoring tools, so you might get some aggregate data. So if you look at this list, you might get a list of users down the side here. Then you get a list of, you know, each one of these little boxes might be tasks or time units that have worked on something, and you can tell how long and how many items work that people have performed over the last few days. So you can see down here, Marion O'Moon has worked on 36 items, and mostly it's all green. A couple of things are getting read out towards the end. Elise Hamilton has worked on 21 items, and each of these items might have taken a certain period of time. If you go all the way down, you can see down here Sherry Melton has only worked on 1 item, and it's taken 12 days. Franklin Vick has worked on 1 item over 15 days. And Patricia Magnum has worked on 1 item and it's taken 1 day, and it's green. So you can get an idea. You can see the sort of almost like a hotspot type thing we saw last week. You can see the work items that have been performed, and you can see roughly how long they've taken, whether they're green, or light green, or whether they're moving into the red. Something's taking a long time. And you can look at people's performance. So these are the sorts of things you can see with these automated business process management systems.
The Victorian Institute of Technology has other great videos covering many different topics. Please check them out, and thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe the video for more great content like this.